It wasn't racial equity, but it was a department that dealt with racial equity within San Diego Unified School District. When they brought that board meeting to the public, it said they were going to abolish this department. And everybody gasped. All of us got up and spoke about the terminology that they use, the fact that 66% of the Black and brown youth that were being referred to the local law enforcement were from San Diego Unified School District. How are you getting rid of a department that is still a pipeline to prison and jail? You know, how are you getting rid of a department that is supposed to be the buffer, right, for parents to go to get support and help when there is a race issue? How do you
episode of Thursday Thoughts? My name is Lynn Idahosa. I'm the Executive Director of the Federal Way Black Collective, and I am so excited for the phenomenal panel I have to discuss with us this evening. Tonight, we're going to talk about education and the state of education and the new administration. So the first panelist I want to introduce is Christina Laster, and she's a returning guest, and I'll allow her to introduce herself with all of her accolades and go ahead and pass the mic.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be in this space with you all. I much appreciate it. I like returning and being able to talk about what's happening with Black students. Definitely pertinent information. I'm Christina Laster, civil rights activist and humanitarian. I am also a director of policy and legislation in education space. And I have served in the area of policy and legislation for quite some time, also civil rights, pertaining specifically to education with a focus on what is happening with Black students. So I'm just glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, I'll pass it to Roosevelt.
I'm Roosevelt Blackman. I'm the Lincoln Cluster Chair and Gompers SEC Chair. And I've served on many committees within the San Diego Unified School District. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, thank you. And let's see.
Tasha.
Who's going to pass to Roosevelt?
Hi.
Tasha. Go ahead, Tasha.
Hi, my name is Tasha Williamson. I am a community advocate, social justice activist. I also help families with IEPs in the education system and support folks understanding the law, IDEA, and Lanterman Act for special needs, and then just the families who are impacted by the justice system. As well as disproportionate impacts to suspension and expulsion in the education system.
Arameek.
Hi, I'm Arameek Glass Blake. I'm the Executive Director of Generation Justice, which is a youth-led activism, organizing, and advocacy organization. I sit on multiple boards directing how restorative justice and restorative practice is implemented in our school system, our criminal justice system, and our juvenile justice system.
Thank you all so much for joining me tonight. I'm really excited for the conversation we're going to be able to have with the community. So tonight our topic is basically the state of education, and I know that although these issues don't feel like they affect the Pacific Northwest directly, I personally felt through my conversations with Christina that they definitely do. So where would you guys like to start tonight?
You know, I want to just start this conversation out with Monday at a time when we were supposed to be celebrating just the progress and change and the bodies blood, sweat, tears, committed to bringing in civil rights and, you know, what should be natural and innate human rights. But we had to fight for them to be codified, fighting for that equity, fighting for that true and lasting change. And, you know, really just thinking about that, we were hit with an announcement. You know, San Diego County's superintendent, it was appointed as the deputy ed sec. And really on that day, it hit our community in such a way that we were like, wow, how do our children get thrown under the bus and this gets rewarded, right, on a national platform? And why would we want to be silent, knowing that now that person would be unleashed on the nation? And so if nothing else, we were just left to really think about that, and think about how much progress and change have we really been able to accomplish if this types of things get rewarded. And I think everybody on here is reflective of a different aspect of the education justice movement in that county and can bring in their perspective of what has taken place, right? All of us are truly committed and care deeply for our children in our community, right? And so we know that of all the fights that we could be fighting, we're still here fighting for quality education for our children and not backing down, right? I'm just going to start out with the words of late C.T. Vivian, a great civil rights activist leader who, fighting for the right to vote in the streets, said, we're willing to be beaten in the streets for democracy, and you misuse democracy in the streets as blood trickled down his face. And so here we are in 2021 saying that in our hearts and in our minds. And what are we going to be able to really do to make sure the pathway is set forward to true progress and change for our children? And that's what we fight for. So we're not going to back down off of this exposure, and we're definitely not going to back down off of the civil rights violations that have taken place to our children, and accountability and education justice behind that. And so I'm gonna go ahead and start off with that piece, and I'll let everybody that's joining me tonight really bring in their perspective in this battle.
Thank you, guys.
We just popcorn, y'all go.
Yeah.
Roosevelt?
Oh, you're on mute.
No, can't hear you, brother.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chuck. Oh, yeah, we can hear you now, brother. Good job.
Okay. Well, let me just start off with this, because as serving as the SEC chair and being the cluster chair, I've seen a lot of misappropriation of Title I, which is a very key resource for our children, and it's been done for well over 35 years here, and unfortunately, it's never been brought to the light that it's being brought to now. I continue to fight this oppression, the oppressive policies that has been perpetrated against our Latino babies and our African American babies.
Indigenous.
It's just not a lot of the parents knows about how this affects their children, about not understanding the budget. And this has made our children become stagnated. And we have lost generations of children because of it. And it's got to stop. And the only way we can stop that is we have to mobilize. We have to work together and to fight against this district. And if you've seen Gompers and you see how Gompers stood up and pushed back against the district, so can this community do the same thing. And that's all I have to add for now.
What does that look like to really strengthen community involvement? Because I feel like there's clearly a lot of communities of color that have input and valid input to bring forth to the districts, but there's also a very clear disconnect because the majority of them don't very much feel heard. And then when there's actions taken off of that lack of being heard, so what's that first step to bridging that gap? Do you guys feel like, what are the tools we need in our tool belt?
You know, I want to start this off by saying there's a difference between having a complaint and having a civil rights violation, right? You know, that right there, when you're talking about having IEPs that are not in compliance, when you're talking about having Title I funding that is misappropriated and misallocated, and there's no ability to get that through public records, right? That information should be transparent. That information should be made known to the public. IEPs have federal rules and regulations behind them under IDEA and FAIT, right? And those things should be in compliance with it. So when you have things that are illegally happening, that accountability looks different, and there needs to be an escalation process to that. So yes, you could go ahead and ask the districts to be in compliance, but when they're not willing to comply, then we need to be willing to take it outside of their hands and into the courts, right? We need to be willing to say, we are going to pursue education justice because our children don't get another opportunity. We don't have time to waste. You don't get a K through 12 redo. And so it's very important to be able to be willing to stand up, even in the face of adversity, even in the face of intimidation, even in the face of fear, and understand that this is your child, right? You have to do everything within your power. And when your voice is no longer being heard and there are things that are being illegally done, then that needs to be handled in another realm. Because if you can't get justice in one realm, you need to really seek and pursue it in another. And I'll just start out with that.
Well, let's unpack that. What do those steps look like for parents?
Tasha, if you want to talk about the IEP thing, then I'm going to go ahead and defer to you.
Okay. Most definitely, I think that for parents, it's supposed to be an IEP team. And so what I've come into over and over again is that it is staff members who are actually running these meetings and not educating the parents so that they can be a part of the team and be included. And so oftentimes what has happened is our kids have been suspended and expelled with IEPs or special needs. Because they have what is called manifestation hearings or meetings. And in these manifestation meetings, the parents don't understand that if the kid's behavior is a part of the IEP in the incident, then there is resources, not suspension and expulsion. And what has been happening at San Diego Unified School District and other schools within the county is that these kids have been suspended and expelled. And what we found out through Black Minds Matter is the kids were Black, they were Indigenous, or they were foster kids that were the most impacted. And so we continue to fight against it by doing exactly what Christina said, is going through the appeals process so that they can have what is somewhat a court process with IEPs. And they can get an attorney, and that attorney is paid for if they win through the school district, which makes it easier for parents to have an attorney, knowing that because the attorney will know if they will be able to win the case. Other issues have been that they have failed to follow law in responding to parents who have written a request to have their kid evaluated for an IEP or assessed for an IEP. We have some schools that have told parents there is a 2-year wait list. and that is a strict, egregious violation to IDEA law. Everything you do with a child that has an IEP must be in writing. And everything you do, you should keep. You should get a copy. You should put a date and a timestamp and who you gave it to. What I do with my families is I give them a file book so that they can keep their records in a file. That has helped them. I also give them the laws so that they can begin to learn them. I actually teach my parents how to be successful in IEP meetings and throughout their students' school life, because IEPs follow you from school to school, from state to state, wherever you are. So these have been a few of the egregious things that have happened. One most egregious thing, high school, where 2 special needs students, one was sodomized by the other, and there was an attempt to cover it up, and a lot of people were harmed. And the child who went to a different school after victimizing the other child, he went to a different school district. That school district had no knowledge of the incident that had occurred, and so they didn't know, so that they could keep their own children safe. And so for me, it was, how do you then have this superintendent who has not just done this once, but has done this over and over and over again, where there is sexual assaults on school campuses and they are attempted to be covered up. There is no justice or justification for what she has done and what her staff has done. They have also told staff to lie to parents in IEP, with IEPs, and in IEP meetings. And that was recorded on a Facebook Live during a teachers union meeting, where a teacher stood up in front of executive staff for special needs at the district level and said, we are being told by this district to lie to our parents with IEPs. None of this has been justified. Some of it has not been corrected, and it continues. And so how do we have now a woman who has been horrible to Black children and kept systemic racism going, and children with special needs and their parents, and giving pink slips every year to teachers while she was hiring people to figure salaries in her office? These are all egregious things. I cannot see her running anything in the nation where there are more Black children and children of color and children with special needs that she could damage. Aren't we enough?
Oh, that's incredibly powerful, first of all. And I appreciate you guys for taking the time to speak the truth of what's been going on in your communities, because the reality is, anytime someone's elevated to a position of power, we should evaluate what they've done in their past, and not just for face value, but take a look at how it played a role in community, because unintended consequences can only be amplified with elevation.
I mean, this is a woman who on court documents was talking about 2 elementary school children having, there was a sexual assault. And she said, how do you feel about it, or somewhat like that was the question was posed to her. And she said, well, it depends on what it is, if it's really bad. This is a sexual assault of an elementary school child that you tried to cover up after private investigator came in and investigated and told everything that went on. And you on the stand now saying that a sexual assault of any kind, or it depends on what it is, that's offensive it should be offensive to everybody. And this is who you want to be second in command of education of the nation? No.
What stands out to me also is you mentioned the appeals process and the clarity of that process and how things were brought forward. And one thing I'm not sure if we've touched on yet tonight, but I remember reading was that there was an office established that had to do with equity that was disbanded. So even though there was clearly an effort put forth by community to establish some standards, this effort was disrupted.
Yeah, and what was the word that they used, Christina? Because it wasn't disbanded.
You talking about the Race and Human Relations Department.
Yeah,
right.
they didn't use
Thank
this
you, and I'm
What
sorry I
word
keep
did they
misstating
use?
the name.
And you know what? It's beyond that too, right? Because how many times as Black parents do we go and say we need to have an equity plan out about what's happening with the African American student achievement, right? And that was denied, or either it was like, okay, and then nothing was implemented, right? And you're in a position of power and authority and sets the tone as a leader. And this is the type of tone that you set, that these constant offenses and repetitive oppressive tactics and practices get to happen under your reign. And then this is someone that people want unleashed on the nation. I think not, right? And I don't think that the vetting of people that actually are close to the pain and suffering, are close to the knowledge, are close to what is happening to their children, who we are right here, was really carefully considered, right? And so that's why it's like we have to continuously pursue justice, regardless of the time and hour. You see, we all on here at 9:00 at night, right? We have to continually expose these bad actors. A lot of people, back down out of fear and intimidation. But the only thing I fear is what can happen to the children if we don't stand up, right? You ought to be afraid of that. I'm going to tell you right now what can happen to them as lifelong learners, as children that need to have a future and a hope. And that cannot be stolen and robbed from them at such a young age. We set them on a course of action in a pathway that is not pretty. And so I'm going to let Aramik talk about, her efforts in really mobilizing the community as well, because all of us have played a different role. And that's important, that everybody does play a different role and be able to combat these kind of things.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, thank you.
So I think my perspective on all of this is, as soon as I heard that Cindy was being elevated, I went on not only a tweeting frenzy, but also just calling and starting to organize folks around what do we do. And I woke up to text saying, good riddance. At least we're getting rid of her. And my perspective is, if someone has harmed on a local city level, imagine the damage that they can do to young people, Black and brown young people throughout this country. And anything that she does in that platform is going to trickle down. And I think we have to get out of the habit of putting our mess and wanting to get rid of someone so bad that we're willing to put this stuff on other people, when in actuality it's still going to end up impacting and affecting us. And I think another thing is, she has harmed, it's more so about a system of harm and a system of white supremacy within our school system. And one of the things that I'm trying to get people to understand, as much as we as a community want to get involved and we're demanding that we have equity in all of these different things, we have to first hold folks accountable, because this is an example of how people in positions of power, political positions, don't have to do the right thing. They just have to know the right people. And that's the only reason why she's in the position and nominated, is not because she's been doing great work, not on her merits, not on anything that she's done for San Diego School District, but simply because she's connected to the right powerful people. And we have to have unwavering ability to fight against this systemic system that continues to oppress and uphold these inequities and disparities. And so that's what I've been doing, is really using my platform to have this conversation, to challenge those. There are people that say that they are for our community, particularly people that look like us. But because it is a power structure and a political structure and a favor structure, they're applauding her and saying all of these different things, and they have to be held accountable too, because those are the people that we put in positions of power to represent us, and then they ultimately turn their back on us and do harmful things or support harmful people. And so I think, we have the NAACP, we have, BAPAC, we have different teachers unions and associations. We have different people that are coming together as a collective to not only hold our political system accountable, but also what is the process moving forward, because Cindy was hired during a backdoor deal. And so to make sure that our next superintendent it's transparent, the process is transparent, the process is equitable, and the process is done right, and the person is chosen by the community, by the parents, by the teachers, by those who have stake in all of this. So that's my little piece on this.
Thank you so much, because that is so much of what we need to move forward. One of the things that I think is important is that we're talking about systems. In the midst of a pandemic, overwhelmingly what I keep hearing is that we need the Black community to trust us, but I haven't heard any investment in building that trust. And that starts in our babies. It starts in healthcare. Like, there's so many areas where it starts. But I think that conversation just kind of has to change, because we can't just keep waiting. We can't pull the trigger and just keep sending our babies into situations without having that transparency and also having accountability, but having mechanisms built so we know that it's not just this traditional form or whatever it is you had, in the past 10 years. That is no longer acceptable. It does need to be something enhanced. It does need to be innovative, and it does need to actually speak to the current socioeconomic and cultural makeup of our communities.
Right. And I want to give Roosevelt a chance to really talk about, his fight in the local community to make sure that transparency happens. Right. Because I know that that's been a struggle over and over again. Just like, come on, this, why is this information being held back? Why are we not given the proper information to be able to understand where the public dollars and things are going? And so I want to let Roosevelt really speak to that, because he's close to that type of situation, as well as accountability and transparency and holding people, to task.
I'm being yes. The situation that belongs with that is that because it is being well hidden. And a lot of our parents just do not know how to understand or even find out about what's going on with that budget. They do not want the information to leak out. If you look at the district website right now, most of those schools, the financial stuff is being blocked. Okay, you can't even see it because they have something to hide. And what I've done, I sent out a document request against, especially Lincoln High School. The misappropriation of Lincoln High School, well over $400,000. They tried to derail me all they can, but the proof is in the pudding. I have all the information. I have all the documentation. They know I know, but not everybody knows. But they know I know, and they are determined to try to keep that information from coming public. And all our schools in our local clusters, it is more than just Lincoln. That's well over probably like eight out of the 14 schools is misappropriating. So you have to understand, in order for that to happen, parents must push back on this. It's not just the cluster chair have to do it. It's the whole community have to push back on this type of stuff. I mean, one voice is one voice, but when we all come together and push back on it and ask for transparency, these things can happen. They don't want this information to come out. And it's up to us as a community to push back on this and demand them to be transparent. That's the only way this is going to happen. We have a few fighters out there, such as myself, You have Sally Smith out there. You have Tasha. You have Francine Maxwell. I mean, you have quite a few others, but that's not enough of us out there that really knows exactly. And Christina, let me make sure I count you in. That's out there that's really pushing back on this type of thing, but it's just not enough of us. And some of us who do know have turned a blind eye. They also know. So it's a continuous fight to hold people accountable, to continue to put back and make sure that right now at my cluster right now, they cannot come on my cluster with untruth information. They must bring facts. If they bring untruth information, they will be challenged, and they know that. So these are one of the things that I'm trying to do as far as the cluster is concerned, is to make it transparency, making sure we have that opening and dialogue, and make sure that all our parents are educated on the SEC or SGT or ELAC or the PTO or whatever, that they all need to be educated about this stuff. The budget is very, very important. That's one of the key components. If you ever want to find the wrong, just follow the money. And if they know where to find it, you will find all the problems that you need to find out. It's a work. I mean, it's a work. I've been doing this for over 11, 12 years now, and I'm still fighting for it.
And I know I saw Tasha wanted to say something, but before Tasha say something, the whole question was around trust, right? And so if you continuously break the trust bond with people, then how do you expect to get it back when you haven't even worked for it? You ain't did nothing for it, except for continuously break the trust bond, right? So we have to look at that toxic type of relationship and break free from that. And we have to know that the people that are complicit in these actions, that are sitting there and understanding exactly what's going on and aren't saying anything, and are watching them, are somehow economically benefiting from our exploitation. And we got to be willing to call them out too, because they're not trustworthy either, right? We are in a day and age, in an era where we have to fiercely guard and protect our children, and we have to do that by any means necessary, and that's just the bottom line. And so those people that are complicit, that may look like us, that are sitting back and somehow benefiting off of that economic exploitation structure, and not saying anything, they need to be called out and exposed too, and we can't be fearful about that. Because we're not in that time frame where it's just like, oh, you guys be quiet and go sit down and wait 10 years. Our kids can't wait. Our kids cannot wait. And we're talking about the future, right? We're investing in the future. I don't do this because I'm looking for an education. We already received our education, right? Like, this fight is strictly pouring our souls, our lives, our livelihood, everything that we have into the future and what we're committing for them, right? I don't want them to have a harder time than we do. Each generation should do better than the last. And what we're seeing, we got to fight for it. And so I'm going to let Tasha go on ahead and pick it up, because I saw that she had her hand up and I don't want to cut her time.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
You got, okay, because I was muted from the host. I just want to say that, like, even if we go back to how she continued racism in this system, Roosevelt talked about it briefly with the racial, what was it called? The name of the team, race equity. It wasn't race equity, but it was a department that dealt with the racial equity within San Diego Unified School District. When they brought that board meeting to the public, it said they were going to abolish this department. And everybody gasped. All of us got up and spoke about the terminology that they use, the fact that 66% of the Black and brown youth that were being referred to the local law enforcement were from San Diego Unified School District. How are you getting rid of a department that is still a pipeline to prison and jail? You know, how are you getting rid of a department that is supposed to be the buffer, right, for parents to go to get support and help when there is a race issue? How do you abolish a department and you got, you know, a lynch on the door of a school principal, you know, or you got the N-word scribed on school walls? How do you, where is that? And some of this was being done as they were bringing in restorative justice, right? And so we know that they invest in what they truly care about. And we know that they underinvested in restorative justice. We know that there was mistreatment of staff at restorative justice. There was a lack of resources. It was hard to get things out to schools. We know how that played out because the top level people did not have the investment or the heart that the people who were actually doing that work.
Right.
And so now those people are in other places and spaces within the county doing that work. So for me, it's a no-brainer that, you know, everybody wants to pick and choose who leads what. I just want us to do it. I want us to get the information out there widely. I want us to make sure that she does not make it to that top level to hurt hundreds of thousands of other children in our nation, because she already showed us who she was. We don't need her to show the rest of the world and hurt more of our people and our allies and our other brown brothers and sisters and indigenous brothers and sisters. We don't need that. We know it's real because we saw it happen. Many of us, people that were here, people that come to board meetings all the time, parents, staff, teachers, it doesn't matter. You gave pink slips to teachers every single year, but not one of them went to your executive staff. Not one who was making six-figure salaries. Where's the justice in that?
Man, this is like really heavy to me because I feel like overwhelmingly everyone was just like, you know, kudos, we got our cookies, we got through November 4th, we did it, it's done, work over, you know, promised land. And that makes me uncomfortable because I feel like there's so much work we have to do in a lot of areas, but specifically when it comes to our children, like in the past few years or the past year, right, we've entered a pandemic. They've never entered these scenarios. We can't even really quantify the amount of trauma every child in America is experiencing, let alone coupled with the fact of having unmutable characteristics and the stigmas that you experience in the public school system. In a time when like our parents were already not having the best access, how do we combat this new narrative of everything being virtual? How do they get behind initiatives? Because I feel like we're in a time where strategically we can plan on a nationwide scale because most things are virtual.
I believe that, you know, when you want to test the moral center and ethical center of a society, you can see how it treats its children. How are we treating our children? How are we treating our vulnerable populations of people will tell us where we as a society are at and where we are headed, right? And so there's a time where you pause. And I think there's power in a collective action of saying, you know what? The system wants to create this type of structure of harm that we're not going to enroll our kids in the system. And we have to collectively choose to help each other do something else because this is not working. And our children were already at a deficit before the pandemic, but now it's almost like, okay, y'all hurry up and wait. But nobody was saying hurry up and wait to get to the polling locations, okay? And the same people that got voted in needs to be looked at as far as getting voted out, recalled. I don't care what the process is. If you aren't doing your job to protect the vulnerable populations, children being the most vulnerable, relying on us for everything that they have for their life and livelihoods, and you're saying it's okay to continue to perpetuate harm through education systems, through social systems and structures and things like that, it's time to take a pause and reevaluate where we are as a society and how far have we really gotten, right? Like, that's a real thing to think about and look at. And so I really just want to say that, and I wanted to really rest in people's minds and hearts. Everybody that is watching this, everybody that is here can do one thing today and then do another thing tomorrow, and then do another thing, and then continue to put one foot forward behind the next, and move in the direction that our kids deserve. They do not deserve this kind of treatment. They don't even deserve to have to watch us fight against this kind of treatment. Think about that, right? They're watching us fight against this kind of treatment. And that's okay, because they're learning how to fight for justice and stand up. But think about even that piece right there, right? Going from one extreme to the next and constantly seeing this battle. And if you don't think they're paying attention, please, you better ask them. I see it on Roblox. I see it on all the little gaming things. The kids are talking about what is happening with school. The kids are talking about what is happening in the nation, and they are expressing how they feel and how they are experiencing those things in real time, right? And so we would pay good attention to the pulse of what is happening in society by how we treat our children.
I want to say, that also a while ago, I was talking to folks about boycotting the school system, because when you take their money from them, things change. When you take their money from them, things change. We were talking about having children going to parks and having children going to churches. To get learning, to get their packets from their teachers so that they could actually study, but not attend school to get that dollar point that each school would get for each child. Because every time a child goes to school, the school district and the school get money for that child's presence.
What's up?
And so, these were some of the things that we were talking about. I did it with my son.
I can hear you.
When I was frustrated, because for me, it was a thing of making a point. Like, my son, it's a privilege for my son to be in this school, right? But it is also a privilege for this school to have my son, because you get paid for him, and you get paid a lot of money for him because he's special needs. So a special needs child, the money flows more than a regular child, because there are other services and supports and other funding, federal, state, all kind of money that comes into school districts for kids who are special needs. And so I took my son out for a week and had him do his work, but took him out for a week, and there were calls and there were changes, and they actually changed the letter that upset me of why I took him out, and so these are some of the things. And then they started working with parents to engage them, because this was along the lines of, if your kid is truant, my son is in kindergarten, that there's difficulty getting him on the bus, and you're sending me a truancy letter saying that me and my son could be arrested. So I'm going to take him out for a week and see if you come get us. And what they did was they called the school district. They had them change that letter completely. I said, because what if I was another parent and I just decided to remove my son from the school altogether?
Right.
Because I'm scared. What's next? CPS? What's this? What's that? They're lucky that I was the right parent, because then you changed your letter. Then you opened up Saturday school. Then you did all other things. You did other things that you should be doing in the education system, but not sending children a parent a letter with some, numbers on it for the law to tell me that you will arrest me and my 6-year-old son for him not being in school for 4 days. So I'm going to keep him out for another 5. You going to come get me? There's other things. So then we had to have those conversations because that was a lot of money that they lost.
Right.
Imagine if my was 10,000 kids, 10,000 Black kids, 20,000 Black kids. They would sit down with all of us and start talking.
I think it's also important for parents to start considering this perspective of not like, oh, when they approach the school districts of, oh, what is it that you can offer me? But here is what you're paid to do for me. I know that this is well within the scope of work that my child deserves. And I feel like they don't approach it from that perspective of power. Even when I talk to communities and I'm talking to parents, they feel like they're searching for things, but there's clear guidelines already mandated that are there to empower them. Albeit, we still have issues, don't get me wrong, but there are a lot of baseline things I feel like we should have a better groundwork laid for to be shared.
They know how to treat their white children. So they know how to treat their white children. So if they know how to treat their white children and their white children know how to play effectively with our Black and brown children and indigenous children because all they want to do is play, then they know how to treat all children. It's whether or not they want to. And so that is in line with racism. That is in line with white power systemic structures that want to remain white, that want to remain in power, that want to remain educating their children to the top level and not everybody else. And that is what we have been dealing with from day one, every generation. Dr. Starla Lewis said it best, that reparations is not just about money. We need to have our own schools. We need to have our own banks. We need to have our own housing. We need to have all of our stuff. It will help us to give us the reparations so that we can educate ourselves and remove ourselves from these systems that don't want to educate us and disproportionately impact us with terror and trauma and treatment that is poor and keeps us, devastated into our adult lives. This is what we deal with. That's what Black Minds Matter is about with Dr. Luke Woods. So when he talks about that, he talks about how our children are treated and how it impacts them while they have child studies to show how trauma from your childhood goes into your adulthood. That's why you have the fight between what is restorative and what is transformative, right? Because what are we restoring ourselves to is oftentimes what you hear with restorative, and how do we transform, different systems, right? But in all of that, do they even see us as human and having the possibility to restore or transform any of their systems? When we have still our children going to juvenile hall, and we have a justice system committee that wanted to close down juvenile hall, wanted the East Mesa juvenile hall in 2019, and the probation department refused because of the trauma and brutality that was going on. So this doesn't just hit education. It goes from education to probation to police to everything. It hits everything, every single thing. And our parents are strategically pushed out so that they don't get involved. I go to white schools and you see parents for blocks and blocks and blocks. I go into urban community schools, and where are the parents? The parents are strategically pushed out. I want
to give Roosevelt a chance to say an ending statement. He has to go. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Tasha. Go ahead, Roosevelt. If you have something you want to close.
I just want to say thank you guys for inviting me. It's very informative. So many different areas people are fighting for justice for our children. Unfortunately, I have to get ready to leave because I got to leave out of town early in the morning. But any future events, Christina, please reach out to me because I want to continue to join this collaborative event here, because there's a lot of information that need to be said. But before I leave, I want to give you guys a heads up that at the cluster meeting just minutes ago, after I finished it, the board trustees says if the superintendent did not be selected, they hold her job open for her if she doesn't get selected.
Wow.
So I just want to let you know just exactly how things are going. If she doesn't get picked for the Deputy Secretary of Education, she's coming back. And they hold a job open for her. So I just want to let you guys know that stuff. So thank you guys anyway. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
When it comes to the situation now, we have information. We know exactly someone in particular that's elevating to a particular position of power. What is it that you need from parents in the next few days?
Arameek, I see you trying to talk.
Yeah, I'm doing everything on my phone because it wouldn't work on my laptop. So sorry about the complications. So I would say, as far as what we need parents to do, two things. So we have to think of it as far as short-term, midterm, long-term goals, and local versus national. And the reality of it is that, like Roosevelt said, if she doesn't get, which we don't want her to get picked, she'll come back to, and we have to make sure that we're calling in, call your senators, look and see who your senator is, call your senator and tell the senator why it would be completely problematic and harmful for her to become the vice sec. And then also there are multiple groups like Lincoln Cluster. April can, Christina can give some perspective on the different groups that there are, and get a part of those groups, because there are conversations about what does the community want as a superintendent. How does the community, how do parents get involved? How do we make sure that we are the decision makers and not the political power structure behind closed doors making the decisions? And I can tell you right now, because I'm so, in the political back rooms as well, there are already people making decisions that are directly going to impact and harm us. So I would say we have to organize and make sure that parents start to not only make phone calls, but start to get engaged in these meetings that are taking place, and to advocate for what they want to see, the type of person they want to see, and if there's actual individuals that they want to put their name forth, so that we can start to vet them and make sure that they would be right for our San Diego school district. And so we have to make sure she doesn't get in, like I said, on the national level, and she doesn't come back here. She doesn't have a home here. Her job is done. And so we have the ability to advocate for those things. So I would say that's a couple of the things that parents can do. We are virtual, but there's so many Zooms. I've been on probably 20 today. There's so many Zooms taking place. There's so many, you can email your senators, you can email your school board members. You just elected a few, you need to hold them accountable. Sharon Whitehurst Payne has been completely harmful, and somehow she got reelected, which we have to start looking at ourselves and holding ourselves accountable on how these people are even getting voted in.
So I'm gonna let Tasha finish the closing statement, but I have been commenting in the chat Thank you guys for having me. I have to go as well. But if you want to reach out to me via the Facebook Messenger or anything, I'm definitely willing to get that information to you and how you can help and support the efforts on the ground in San Diego County. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? It looks like I'm still muted. You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So on the local level, I know that everybody on that board listens to Richard Barrera. And so Richard Barrera has been controlling our local school district board for a long time. And, you know, not only do we have to look at having a superintendent go, we may also need to look at recalling board members. You may need to look at what does that middle or long-term version that she was talking about, what does that look like, you know, for for the whole system? And so these are things that we also consider, because having people that secretly sit behind in meetings controlling who's going to be in a seat and who's not going to be in a seat and how people are going to vote is not a democracy. And so and we have to question, even when we have predominantly Democrats sitting anywhere that are not acting, their actions are not reflective of a democracy. We have to even question them. And we may have to remove them. And so these are things that we as voters need to look into, because it is not just her position. It is why they kept her there so long with all the damage that she has done. They are complicit in this. And for that complicity, there must be consequences. So for me, I just want to say that I've seen so much damage in this school district, but not just this school district, in this county, to our children, to our parents. And it is well over time that we do all come together and that we start to really look at where we all fit in this and where our roles are to help in this action that we are all committed to for at least almost 2 decades, and some even more than that. We have our elders that have been fighting longer than we have and are still out here in the fight. And so I would just tell people, do not give up, do not give in, you know, and get ready. Get ready. It's time to put those bootstraps on. It's time to buckle up. And it's time to be about the business of making sure they know that our children matter.
I really appreciate you all for joining us this evening. I'm so appreciative for growing our network of facilitators. Like right now, our parents are in a position where they need to hear from everyone to understand how to advocate best for their children. We're in a critical time where I'm located in Federal Way, just south of Seattle. They had protests here that stemmed and participated on protests in 18 countries. Like right now, we're in the middle of a session that is almost completely virtual around this country. Like if community ever had equity in a sense of being able to bring their voice to the table, not being necessarily needing an invitation. Like there's a space right now where someone like me, you both said it too. So it's like, you know, you have political space. I do too. Like I go and testify. Like I know, like I want to bring someone with me, and I'm able to do that on a larger scale this year. And we've got to get ready in our communities because they need to hear what we're saying. Like those purse strings, those budgets, we need to be holding them accountable. And we also have to be having our conversations like this amongst our groups, figuring out what is it exactly that we want, so we can have a coordinated response. So when we go to testify, we're all saying that we want X, Y, Z, and that's exactly what we want. We don't want a minimum. We don't want a spin-off. We don't want a piece of it. Like the reality is, like our children are being left behind. And they're saying it. Statistics are everywhere. They're buzzwords. Videos are popping up. Like everyone's like having this conversation, but not where it counts. And what I love is that we're finding spaces all over the country to create these spaces. I want to continue this conversation. We're going to, we have a conversation on education about every 6-8 weeks on this show. And I want to bring it more so your guys' knowledge into our community meetings so that we can start to strategize, because we've got to get stronger. I watched, Killer Mike had a special on Netflix, and he said, like, organize, strategize, mobilize. Like, there's like 4 pillars. And it's like, it's that serious. We can't just keep saying what someone's not doing for us or whatever. And I'm not saying y'all complain, because a ton of us are in these streets. But I don't care if you're a complainer, a not knower, if you're lazy, if you're just doing whatever, if you're working super hard, figure out how your neighborhood community member, your friend, your sister girl, your brother, we all have villages, and we got to figure out how to play our parts together. You may not be able to testify, but maybe I can watch your kids so you can. We got to strategize and build up our community in the ways that work best for us and are culturally relevant. There are ways that we do this, and we do this well, and we can shine. And I really, really, really appreciate you guys for joining me. I can't wait for like our offline meetings to bring more and greater to the community. And I appreciate you guys staying up late with me tonight. I want to make sure you guys tune in with us Monday for Health and Wellness Mondays with Dre and Alfred White. We'll be back next Thursday with Thursday Thoughts again. And we will be really excited to roll out our newsletter this month with the release of our All in Washington program. We'll be sorting our family friend. We'll be supporting our family friend and neighbor child care entities in the King County area. Thank you all for joining us, and have a good night. Thanks, guys.